This year's celebrations take place in an international environment marked by instability, fear about the future, religious extremism and intolerance, wars and armed conflicts, inequality, epidemics like Ebola, and a mistrust of the intentions amongst countries and blocs. Some fear a return to Cold War with inflammatory rhetoric and with increased armament spending, which takes away valuable resources that are desperately needed for the actual and dire problems facing humanity. The events in Ukraine have poisoned the European and international climate. Instead of engaging in dialogue and searching for equitable solutions based on international legitimacy and the protection of human rights, Europe is at a difficult moment with sanctions and counter-sanctions. In the end, there may be no winners. All European countries may be the losers, with consequences for regional and international cooperation. The fall in international markets, the increased unemployment, especially affecting the youth, the rhetoric of hate and mutual recriminations entail the risk of a return to a situation reminiscent of the period before the fall of the Berlin Wall. This inevitably will lead to a new lethal arms race, depriving resources which could be used in Europe and the world for the needs of sustainable development and for bridging the gap between the haves and the have-nots. The frightening events in the whole of the Middle East, the Israeli-Arab conflict, Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, and the appearance of extremist movements necessitate urgent steps and a calm, honest dialogue among diverse cultures and religions. It is clear that the situation that befalls one affects all. In terms of Cyprus, to echo the words of President Nikos Anastasiadis when addressing this year's session of the UN General Assembly, a solution to the Cyprus problem would be to the benefit of all Cypriots, Turkey, our immediate region, and evidently the international community. Furthermore, to relieve all Cypriots, especially the younger generations, the future of the country, from the anachronistic burden of having to live in a divided country in which they're forcibly prevented from enjoying the freedoms which are the birthright of every citizen in the world, is the ultimate desired goal for Cypriots. The opening in 2003 of crossing points between the areas under the control of the Cyprus government and the areas under Turkish control has facilitated to some extent the communication and interaction between Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots and has allowed some minimal trade exchanges. Nonetheless, Cyprus still holds the unacceptable title of being the only divided country in Europe. While this year's commemoration of the 25th anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall act as a hopeful reminder and as an inspiration to Cypriots who want to see an end to the division of their country and who want to live in peace and cooperate in a reunited Cyprus, regrettably, the opening of the checkpoints cannot be compared to the fall of the Berlin Wall. In Cyprus, the wall did not fall, it just fractured. When Denktash partially opened the gates and insisted on maintaining the semblance of a state, hence the insistence on the showing of passports, he reaffirmed the existence of the boundary and the sovereignty of TRNC. In the Annan Plan referendum, the Greek Cypriots in turn chose not to venture into the unknown under a new regime which seemed too complex and fragile, thus unintentionally rescuing the border they so much wished to see go. Cyprus's Green Line divides the island not just geographically, but also socially, politically, and culturally between the us and the them, perpetuating a process of othering which works to alienate the people of the island from each other as it determines the nature of inclusion and exclusion from various social categories and groups. A boundary can be seen as a threshold to another world. It makes us stranger in this land and makes the people of this land strangers to us. Another characteristic of borders is that they are emotional landscapes, wrought with traumatic memories and fears, where the unknown can awaken perhaps unexpected feelings in us. On a cultural tour of the North, organized by the Cyprus Center for Intercultural Studies within the context of the conference, The Role of Education in a Multicultural Cyprus, upon crossing the divide, one of our tour participants asked, "What happens to the cats and the stray dogs of the North that cross over to the South? Are they trapped and placed in shelters to prevent spread of disease?" These questions may sound preposterous, but it should be understood that health and control over space are crucial elements of nationalism. That is, civilized states are meant to protect their borders and their citizens against health risks. And this biopolitical control often slips into national narratives in the form of images of an enemy and the other, seen as a transmitter of diseases and vermin. Most importantly, what questions such as this tour participants reveal is an ecological fallacy that is created by the demarcation of borders. Borders are not fixed, but are indeed porous, and absolute categories cannot be enforced on them. Even prior to the Green Line's partial opening in 2003, many Greek Cypriots, for instance, attempted to cross into the Turkish-occupied north in order to visit their homes or properties. As relational thinker Ash Amin has argued, bounded territories are also spaces of relation, where all kinds of unlike things can knock up against each other in all kinds of ways. Where a border is imposed upon a previously unified landscape, ethnic groups continue to have a natural affinity with the people living on the other side of the border, rather than with the majority population of their own country of residence, but with whom they have no common religious, cultural, or linguistic past. Challenging borders is ultimately a moral issue that addresses people's rights to cross, change their residence, and seek opportunities for a better life elsewhere. The existence of checkpoints on the island of Cyprus run counter to modern and postmodernist understandings of a free world in which people have the basic right to move, to have freedom of employment and residence. Finding a solution to the Cyprus problem, which will guarantee the rights provided by the European Convention on Human Rights, is an imperative. A solution would lead to the prosperity, increased economic development, and cooperation between the members of the two communities. It would allow the people of Cyprus to take advantage of the island's geostrategic situation and enjoy the benefits of the discovered natural resources of hydrocarbons in this sensitive area of the Eastern Mediterranean. Most importantly, the joint cooperation of the two communities in various projects and business ventures would send a strong message to the peoples of the region that religion cannot and should not be an impediment to sharing common dreams of peaceful coexistence. With the Middle East in turmoil, reunited Cyprus could be a beacon of stability and a valuable link with the countries in the region. Additionally, the Turkish Cypriots would benefit exponentially from the reunited economy of the Republic of Cyprus. Such a solution would have positive consequences for the economic progress of Cyprus and would provide new perspectives for utilizing the advantages of the island's geostrategic position. Potential cooperation and investments in the rapidly developing Turkish market and the cooperation of Cypriot and Turkish companies in the Middle East, the Arab Gulf, and the Balkans could usher in a new era in the development possibilities of the country. It would also accord prestige to the Republic of Cyprus and perhaps this way allow the island to develop as a truly political, economic, and interfaith dialogue bridge between Europe and the Middle East. Moreover, conditions of peace and security in the southeastern Mediterranean could be created, contributing to the prosperity of the peoples of this region and to the substantial improvement of the Greco-Turkish relations. Altering Cyprus from a conflict zone to a site of reconciliation, I believe necessitates first and foremost a re-narration of memory. Like most borderlands in Europe, which are victim-intensive places with their historical memories shaped by collective traumas, former hostilities, and shared guilt, Cyprus must re-narrate its history. Narratives play an important role in the perpetuation of trauma, as well as in the recovery from trauma. Clinician Judith Herman argues that for recovery, one must reconstruct a trauma story by relinquishing a story of shame and by restoring bonds with the community. Narrative psychologist Alan Perry and Robert Doan argue that for recovery, groups must construct anew a shared narrative. This shared narrative should move away from adhering to a singular account, but should rather engage in a practice of multiple authorship, which will therapeutically connect people by embracing difference. At the current moment, there are, for instance, two distinct non-shared narratives about the dividing line in Cyprus. Greek Cypriots view it as an aggressive separating wall caused by the Turkish occupation. For the Turks, who describe the 1974 invasion of Cyprus as a peace operation necessary for the rescue of the Turkish Cypriots from the Greek Cypriots, they describe the border as a peace line and view it as a non-negotiable symbol of security. Practicing multiple authorship would entail revising this distinct and absolute conflicting narratives by confronting critically and objectively the homeland's past. That is, Cypriots need to examine what divided the members of the Greek Cypriot and Turkish Cypriot communities, also what unifying elements allowed them to coexist for centuries together, and then reconstruct a shared narrative of dignified survival from trauma. Furthermore, Françoise Davoine and Jean-Max Gaudier argue in their book History Beyond Trauma that recovery is possible when historical trauma is rearticulated through a transferential relation between two subjects who carry pasts that bear witness to war atrocities. They argue that naming the pain on behalf of the other, that is, by engaging in empathetic sharing and drawing parallels between similar traumatic experiences, can glue together broken social bonds. Not only is this empathetic sharing necessary between Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots, but also among the other communities of Cyprus, Cyprus's neighbors, and other peoples who have experienced a similar traumatic past. It is in this context that I believe Cypriots must study and draw lessons from others. German reconciliation efforts, as in the Franco-German case, the German-Jewish and German-Israeli reconciliation, as well as with Germany's neighboring countries of the former Soviet bloc, such as with Poland and Czech Republic, are some such examples. The role of the religious leaders is also vital in reconciliation efforts for reunification. As in the case of the Lutheran Church, which was instrumental in the fall of the Berlin Wall, it is important to note that recently, the interfaith dialogue and common efforts of the Greek Cypriot Archbishop and the Turkish Cypriot Mufti are bearing fruits. The restoration of some religious monuments of both communities, neglected for a long time up to the point of being destroyed, herald a new era of hope for saving the island's religious and cultural heritage. NGOs and organizations such as the Cyprus Center for Intercultural Studies that curates critical discussions about diversity, as well as the Cyprus Academic Dialogue, which promotes greater understanding, mutual respect, and cooperation among Cypriot, Greek, and Turkish academics, and even civil society groups like Literary Agency Cyprus, which supports Anglophone literatures of Cyprus in the world arena, irrespective of the ethnic or language origins of the writers, bring together Cyprus' strangers and place them in conversations with knowledgeable others. Speaking of the Cyprus Center for Intercultural Studies in particular, it has been involved in a number of activities that aim to engage Cypriots and others from the international community in dialogue concerning issues pertaining to diversity and reconciliation. The center works on creating an interdisciplinary space for dialogue that can connect students, scholars, activists, artists, governmental officials, private sector representatives, senior and young professionals, both locally and internationally, with the following objectives: to encourage critical thinking about diversity, to promote knowledge about cultural conflict and reconciliatory practices, to enhance respect of difference and understanding of intercultural connections, and to support empathetic sharing of narratives. The center's inaugural conference explored the political nature of culture and considered to what extent culturally based politics in particular can be beneficial in bringing together divided communities. The Diversity Arts Festival, consisting of academic presentations, an art exhibition, and musical performances by artists living on the island, celebrated the island's diversity of arts and cultures. Our conference on the role of education in a multicultural Cyprus addressed how education can better attend to current problems of coexistence in Cyprus. Furthermore, the center supported an initiative by the University of Nicosia's UNESCO chair entitled Multicultural Cyprus, the Armenian Community. This is the first of a series of events that will celebrate the historical communities of the island. Organized in collaboration with the Mediterranean Institute of Gender Studies, the Office of the European Parliament in Cyprus, the University of Nicosia, the Cyprus Association of Family Planning, European Public Space, Media Zone, and Music TV, the Cypriot Initiative for the Global 1 Billion Rising campaign sought to raise awareness, break the silence, and rise against injustice toward women. The center also co-organized a presentation of the results and a discussion of the report titled Violence Against Women in the Context of Political Transformations and Economic Crisis in the Euro-Mediterranean Region, which was published by the Euro-Mediterranean Human Rights Network. Recently, the center held its second conference on the subject of cultural diplomacy, entitled Cultural Diplomacy and Narratives of Conflict in the Middle East, focusing on the force of narratives to assist in reconciliation and peace. The Booth Project, Hear Me Out, collected and preserved narratives of people sexually diverse and identities living in Cyprus. The information collected will in turn be used to create instructional materials that can address homophobia within and outside school settings. Lastly, Crete and Cyprus at the Crossroads of Civilizations was an event that explored commonalities in Cretan and Cypriot histories and cultures. To conclude, the sharing of narratives is vital toward the understanding between cultures, but also to the recovery from trauma. In this way, with a commitment to dialogue and a belief in the therapeutic processes of intercultural interaction, we contest the supposed fixity of the socially constructed borders on the island. After all, it is in the nature of borders themselves to reflect the very desire for debordering. In other words, a border is never an answer, but always a question regarding the reasons for its constructed existence. It demands our attention. Only through cross-border communication can we find answers to erase the border. Thank you.